Mr. President, I've been engaged in the back and forth for many years concerning the rights of the minority to oppose legislation or nominations for Senate advice and consent, which obviously, as we all know, is part of the Constitution of the United States. And after investing all those hundreds of hours in compromises, both when Republican leadership wanted to act to curtail the rights of the minority, and when Democrats were doing it, I fought hard. A short time ago, Senator Levin and I and Senator Schumer and others changed the rules to try to expedite the consideration of legislation. For a whole lot of reasons, including the fact that a majority of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have never been here in the minority, we have now acted in a draconian fashion and, in my view, have fundamentally, historically damaged this institution. Among other things, for the first time since the United States Senate has been a body, we have now changed the rules with 51 votes rather than 67. First time in history. And unfortunately, the repercussions of this will be that we are moving a step, very significant step, towards a majority rule body. And as my friend from Michigan, Senator Carl Levin, quoted Senator Vandenberg, a former senator from Michigan and a highly regarded individual in this institution, that we have now broken the rules to change the rules. And I read the night we changed the rules from a letter that Senator Robert Byrd, who was one of the most outstanding leaders and clearly the expert on the Constitution and this institution, had written a letter cautioning against it. So the reason why I come to the floor today is not so much to revisit that because it's done, but I'd like to point out I see the first manifestation of now the majority rule vote. I've been a member of the Homeland Security Committee, and I have been involved in these issues for many years. I've also been involved in the so-called Gang of Eight, where we came up with a comprehensive immigration reform bill, which was passed through this body, and we still hope that the other body will address, at least in some way, the issue of comprehensive immigration reform. Well, I come from a border state, as my colleagues know, and our border is not secure. In fact, the majority of drugs that still comes across our southern border comes across the Arizona-Sonora border in Mexico. And my constituents, many of them who live in the southern part of the state of Arizona, have home invasions, have people causing their property. They have, in one case, a rancher has been shot and killed. A Border Patrol agent has been killed. In fact, the reality is that they don't have the same security in the southern part of my state as the rest of our citizens do in other parts of the country. So border security was a fundamental and vitally important issue in the hundreds of hours of debate and discussions that I and my 7 other colleagues engaged in as we shaped the comprehensive immigration reform legislation, which largely intact was passed here through the Senate. And so I went back to my constituents and I said, look, there is a very vital, important provision in this bill, and that is that when this legislation is passed, we will embark on the goal of achieving 90% effective control of our border. Now, we can never get complete control of our border. We all recognize that. But 90% effective control through surveillance, through hiring new people, through capabilities that we have, we can achieve 90% effective control. So then comes the nomination hearing of Mr. Jay Johnson for Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. I asked Mr. Johnson a simple, straightforward question. The question was, Mr. Johnson, when you are Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, will you provide this committee and me, Senator McCain, with a description of the measures that need to be taken in order for us to achieve what we have turned into legislation, at least here in the Senate, 90% effective control of our southern border? His answer was no. His answer, believe it or not, was no. That he could not provide that information. In fact, I was so astonished at that I wrote him a letter, and I received a letter back from him, which I would like included in the record in just a minute, and that is, quote, here it is, November 19th, 2013, Senator McCain. I regret that in my current posture as a nominee and private citizen, I am not now in a position to commit to provide the information you seek from the Department of Homeland Security. At this point, I must respectfully refer you to the department's current leadership. I know this was a matter of discussion between you and Secretary Napolitano, and I understand your frustration. I believe I have demonstrated to you and others on the Senate and House Armed Services Committee, why he said Armed Services Committee, I'm not sure, but I have a strong respect for Congress's oversight role. If I am confirmed, and if your request is still outstanding, at that point I promise that addressing your letter will be a top and immediate priority for me. So in other words, the nominee for the Department of Homeland Security, direct responsibility for securing our borders, direct responsibility as outlined in legislation passed by this body, the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill, refuses to give me and this body the information, and I would hope that there were other senators who might be interested in what's necessary to achieve 90% effective control of our border. He refuses to give me that information. Thanks to the good offices of my beloved friend Carl Levin and my dear friend Senator Carper, I just came from a meeting in my office with Mr. Jay Johnson. Mr. Jay Johnson again repeated to me that he could not give me the information of what is necessary, what tools are necessary to ensure 90% effective control of our border. Now, allegedly, he is being prevented from doing that by the White House. Now, it's stunning. Why would the White House prevent the nominee for Secretary of Homeland Security from providing members of the Senate and members of the committee that oversight Homeland Security information which is fundamental information if we are going to achieve effective control of our border? So now I go back to Arizona and I say, yeah, it's in the law, my friends. It's in the law that we're going to have to get 90% effective control of our border, but I don't know how you do it, because the agency that will be required to do it will not give me the information of what is necessary to do it. So, my friends, we will be voting Monday, I guess, to confirm Mr. Johnson. He will be confirmed, there's no doubt about it, now that we have majority vote. And we have now deprived Republicans of their advice and consent responsibilities and authority. So we've not only changed the rules of the Senate, we have abridged the Constitution of the United States. Because the only way that I could have gotten this information from Mr. Johnson was if I'd have said, I can't approve of your nomination until you provide the information which by any objective observer I am entitled to. And not only entitled to, it's my responsibility to know that. It's my responsibility. That's why we have a committee. That's why we have a committee, the Homeland Security Committee, that oversights the functions of the executive branch. That's how government, equal branches of government are supposed to function. So now we have Mr. Johnson will be confirmed, and the message will go out. Believe me, the message will go out. You don't have to answer a question by a Republican senator. You don't have to respond to a straightforward question. There was nothing devious about the question that I asked Mr. Johnson. There was nothing complicated. I know that they certainly should have the information of what steps and measures are necessary to ensure 90% effective control of our border, which is a requirement in the law that, at least if it is ever passed by, certainly a requirement is passed by the Senate of the United States of America. So it's really a very kind of sad day. It was a sad day for me when we changed the rules. It was a sad day for me to see people who have been here a very short period of time basically shatter the comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, that exists and is vital to doing business here in the United States Senate. So I also would like to point out to my colleagues, particularly those who are new, who really drove this change in the Senate rules, and I want to tell you this: I've been here long enough that what goes around comes around, and what goes around will come around. And to their deep regret, someday, I say to the President and I say to my colleagues who voted for it on a party line vote, for the first time in history, changing the rules of the United States Senate from 67 votes to 51 votes, you will regret it. And the people who will really suffer from this is the American people, because this place is largely dysfunctional anyway. But if you think it was dysfunctional before, wait and see. And I say that with deep, deep regret, because I value and treasure my relationships with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Some of the best friends that I have are on the other side of the aisle. But to expect to do business as usual, when I can't even get a straight answer for a question that now, by not having the answer, inhibits and in ways prohibits my ability to carry out my responsibilities to the citizens of my state, cannot be gone unresponded to. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.